What's up, everyone? Tera Roberts here with FantasyPros, and we are talking players to cut for Week 4. But before we get started, if you want a chance to win a signed Jalen Waddle Miami Dolphins jersey, courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction, you need to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now, comment below on this video, and that's it. We will be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Now let's go ahead and dive right in with players to cut in deep leagues of 12 teams or more. First up, Jimmy Garoppolo. The quarterback position is struggling this year. Big names have gone down with injuries, and others like Tom Brady and Russell Wilson just haven't been performing at a high level. And this means that many fantasy managers are hitting the waiver wire in streaming quarterbacks. One of those quarterbacks might have been Jimmy Garoppolo. And if you picked him up, you can gently place him back on waivers. There is a big problem with Jimmy Garoppolo, aside from the fact that he looked genuinely awful and showed poor decision-making skills in Week 3. The big issue is that there is no upside with Jimmy G. Where other popular streaming options have similar floors to Jimmy G, they have the upside and capability of reaching mid-20s fantasy points or more. These are guys like Carson Wentz, Jameis Winston, Jared Goff. The only time in 2021 where Jimmy G was able to push over that 20-point fantasy mark was in a game where he had 2 rushing touchdowns, which rarely happens. There are just better options on waivers, and you are free to cut Jimmy G. Next up, Sky Moore. Sky Moore is a repeat offender on my list. Last week, he was in the players to cut in shallow leagues category, and this week he is moving on up to someone who you just shouldn't roster at all. Last week, there were reports that the Chiefs wanted to increase Moore's involvement in Week 3. We'll never know if that was true because Moore muffed a punt early, saw a 13% snap count, and not a single target. Last week, we talked about Moore's situation as a rookie compared to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and how this just doesn't have the makings of a back half surge similar to St. Brown. Moore's best week was in Week 1, when he saw a 19% snap count and caught his only target for 30 yards. It's always possible that injuries happen and force the Chiefs to put more trust into their talented rookies, similar to Romeo Doubs, who was on my cut list last week before Sammy Watkins was placed on IR, and before Christian Watson was at risk of missing the game, and then had a massive breakout game when he was finally given significant snap count. But I just don't think you should hold on to Moore waiting for injuries to happen to Juju Smith-Schuster, Miko Hardman, or Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Next up, Miko Hardman. Sky Moore isn't the only Kansas City Chief receiver on this list. And it seems odd to say because Patrick Mahomes is having another top 5 season. But that production just isn't really producing for the wide receivers. The Chiefs have been very clear that they are spreading targets around the receiving core plus running backs, and they are not committed to having one player be the guy. As a result, Juju Smith-Schuster is wide receiver 52 in PPR. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is wide receiver 73. And Miko Hardman is wide receiver 74. Kansas City has one of the worst target shares by position for wide receivers, with receivers only taking 50% of the targets and nearly 30% of targets going to the tight end position. There's just not enough volume to go around, and there's no real prospect of ever achieving consistent usage that would make you feel comfortable putting Hardman into your lineup. Next up, Daryl Williams. This one is tough because there aren't a ton of available running back options on waivers, and you want to hold on to handcuffs. But here's the problem with Daryl Williams. I think it's clear at this point that if James Conner goes down, Williams and Eno Benjamin would split the workload, with Williams getting the heavier share on the ground and Benjamin getting a heavier share through the air. And typically, that would make Williams the more valuable option as the goal line back. But Arizona is a complete mess on offense. In 2021, the most valuable touches for Cardinals running backs were goal line touches. That carried James Conner to a top 5 overall finish at running back with 15 touchdowns on the ground. Thus far, Conner has only had 1 rushing touchdown. Scoring opportunities just aren't there for Arizona, and I'm not sure it's going to get any better. If Conner goes out with an injury, it would be tough for Williams to even achieve double-digit fantasy points. Next up, Hunter Henry. Let's talk tight ends. I've got several that you can drop, and we will start off with Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry was on last week's list, and he will remain on the list until the majority of fantasy managers cut him. Prior to this week, Jakobi Meyers was seeing nearly 30% of team targets. On a team that is a low pass volume team, this made it virtually impossible for anyone other than Meyers to be a usable fantasy asset. Maybe fantasy managers were hoping that with Meyers missing week 3, Henry could see increase in targets. Nope. He caught his only target for 8 yards. Jonnu Smith, on the other hand, had 4 targets, caught all of them. I wish I could tell you why the Patriots give their tight ends such an incredibly low utilization, particularly when they paid so much for both of them. Regardless, this is trending in the wrong direction. Mac Jones is likely to miss time with a high ankle sprain, and Hunter Henry is an incredibly risky start in all formats. Next up, Mike Gesicki. Continuing on the trend of tight ends, tight end has been a complete mess in 2022, so I understand why a lot of fantasy managers may be holding on to Mike Gesicki, dealing with such poor performance at the position. But the solution to this issue is not Mike Gesicki. Gesicki's week 2 performance of 4 receptions on 4 targets for 41 yards and a touchdown on a 61% snap count is not the norm. His week 1 and week 3 performances had only a 40% snap count and 1 reception on 1 target, resulting in less than 2 fantasy points. That's the norm. The Miami offense just isn't designed to support heavy production at tight end. There may be high volume games where Gesicki sneaks in and has a good performance, and maybe you can use that to predict when he's going to be a potential streaming option, but he's just not someone that you should be holding on to on your fantasy roster. Next up, Cole Kmet. Let's talk about one more tight end that you should cut. This one pains me so much to say it, but we can let Cole Kmet go. It's tough because Cole Kmet is constantly on the field, seeing upwards of 80% of snaps, very different from someone like Mike Gesicki. But when your starting quarterback can't complete more than 8 passes, it doesn't matter how often you're on the field or how many routes you run. I was holding judgment on Kmet and Darnell Mooney until we saw them in normal conditions against an average defense. Well, we got that, and the results did not change. Kmet caught 2 of 3 targets for 40 yards in week 3, and Chicago's run game is thriving. It would take a miraculous turn of events for the Bears to reverse course and push high volume enough to make Cole Kmet worthy of a start. Moving on to players to cut in shallow leagues, first up, Justin Fields. Let's kick off this section by continuing our conversation about the Chicago Bears. Justin Fields has thrown for 297 yards. That puts him behind multiple quarterbacks who haven't even played 3 full games. And as previously mentioned during our heartbreaking conversation about Cole Kmet, Fields has yet to complete more than 8 passes in a game. Fields has thrown less passes than Joe Flacco has averaged per game. We didn't expect a massive pass volume from Fields. This is fantasy football, and anyone drafting Fields was doing so for his rushing upside. But any upside is obliterated when you literally don't throw the ball. He's not worth being held at this point, you can drop him. Next up, Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool is an interesting drop candidate. Again, this is only in shallow leagues and not something that I would do in a 12-team league. It's not the worst thing in the world to hold onto Claypool on your bench, but it's only a matter of time before George Pickens overtakes Claypool. Mitch Trubisky has the lowest yards per attempt in the league. And considering how questionable play has been at quarterback this year, that is highly concerning. As long as Mitch Trubisky is at the head of this offense, Claypool is not a startable wide receiver. And by the time that the team opts to move on to Kenny Pickett, Pickens could be the wide receiver too. Opportunity and upside is just limited for Claypool. And finally, Corey Davis. The Jets' wide receiver core is extremely talented. Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, plus excellent pass-catching backs in both Breece Hall and Michael Carter. On top of that, Tyler Conklin has come on strong, commanding the second most targets in the Jets' offense. All of that combined just makes it very difficult for Corey Davis to be a consistently usable option. And I anticipate a reduction in pass volume as well with the return of Zach Wilson. Davis will have good games, and he's a guy that you can pick up and drop to waivers according to how you need to stream options within deeper leagues. I just don't think that he's a depth piece that you want to roster for the remainder of the season. You can cut him. Thanks for watching this video, and remember, if you want a chance to win a signed Jalen Waddle Miami Dolphins jersey courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction, you need to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now, comment below on this video, and that's it. We will be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos, and while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at FantasyPros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.